Hello, welcome to YoungMinds Parents Lounge. I'm Jo, I'm Head of Parent Services.
I'm Emma, the Helpline Manager.
Thank you for joining us today. We're going to be talking about depression in young people and how parents can kind of manage and respond to depression. Emma, when we hear the term depression bandied around a lot, what do we actually mean when we talk about depression?
I think the important thing to acknowledge, Jo, is that depression is a spectrum itself. So we often think about depression being one polarised specific label, and we attribute meaning and sometimes stigma to that. Now, depression itself is a mental health problem and is often characterised by a trend in low mood, and there can be lots of other associated symptoms and behaviours like a significant change and loss of appetite, sleeping, lack of routine, lack of motivation, and a sense of I don't even want to leave the house, or I don't have enjoyment or fulfilment in life. But I think the most important thing that I can acknowledge is that actually 1 in 5 of us experience depression at some point in our lifetime. But equally, when I talk about it being a spectrum, what I actually mean is the reality that often we may feel low for a short period of time, and we're always somewhere on a spectrum with our mental health. So I think it's really useful for parents and young people not to think of depression as being just one polarised mental health illness, problem or disorder, but to look at it a little bit more widely and more holistically.
Can you say a bit about kind of how depression can impact on a family? What are the kind of things that parents are telling us? What are the main issues parents are dealing with?
I mean, I have to say the big one that we hear is particularly about adolescents and young adults who are displaying symptoms of depression, who may be locked in their bedroom, not communicating, not talking, not functioning, not sleeping, not really eating, might be sort of on social media, and might be school refusing, really not functioning. But equally, this is a typical age group where parents don't have parental responsibility, and they typically feel quite immobilised and quite paralysed by that. So what's often useful for parents is to have constructive advice on how do I move this forward.
And what causes depression? So kind of should parents be looking out for things that can, those protective factors? What's the...
Well, I think when you use the term protective factor, that's a really important starting point, Jo, because if there's one thing that can make a difference, it's about having a stable family environment which is nurturing, which is loving. And that stable environment doesn't mean got to be two-parent, doesn't mean it's got to be a mum and a dad. It doesn't matter what the family dynamic and arrangement is. It's about being there for your child, being supportive, having your child's back. They might be gay, they might have gender identity issues, it doesn't matter what the issues are, but being that solid person that says, I support you, I love you, and I back you up is the biggest difference that a parent can make. But there are other factors that can be contributing causal factors for depression. We know that life events can be really significant. If there's been death, if there's been bereavement, if there's been trauma, if there has been neurological trauma, we know from research that this can make a difference and an impact. We also know that there can be genetic predispositions as well. Depression can run in families, as can other mental health problems, illnesses and disorders. And we also know that things like diet, sleep and routine can have a significant impact.
You talked a little bit about the signs and kind of the things that parents come to us, but at what point should a parent think, this is a problem, I should do something about that?
Well, it's a good question, and what I would always say to every parent watching this is you are your greatest child's expert and advocate. No one will ever know your child better than you. If you can see a trend, something that's changing, whether it is communication, behaviour, appetite, mood, communication, whether they're willing to go to school or even leave their bedroom, whatever it is, if you know that that's a significant change in your child's behaviour, that's the time to act.
And what is some of the advice we give to parents? What are some of the tips that we have?
Well, firstly, Jo, I would also say to any parent is be hopeful, be reassuring, actually expect more. I think the thing about living with depression is it's really hard and it's depressing for a parent and it's deeply demoralising. And actually just having the ability to say, I don't think this is okay, and darling, I don't think we can go on like this, and then brainstorming options with the child, involve them in that conversation, particularly if they're an adolescent or a young adult. Don't just make choices for them, make choices with them, and also affirm their autonomy. You might not be able to frog march them and force them to go to the GP, but what you can do as an alternative is say, look darling, this is what I've seen and observed, and I don't think that you're functioning. And actually doing nothing is no longer an option. And even if they won't be cooperative and they don't want to go with you, go on your own. Even if you feel, I'm not going to be taken seriously, just write a bullet pointed list of all of the symptoms, the behaviours, the triggers, the timelines, and the ask. What is it that you want the GP to do? Where do you want them to refer your child to? And go and share that information openly and transparently.
It's very easy to become submerged in a problem, isn't it? And kind
It
of
is.
not have that awareness. But I think what you're saying is it's really clear that parents should set expectations around their children and actually be the parent.
Absolutely, because I think there's often a sense when I talk to families and specifically parents that it's really hard to assert their authority. And I think often it's as though parents are worried about making it worse.
Yes, absolutely.
And they do feel guilty, and they
Yeah.
also feel responsible. Every parent believes that they are responsible for their child's health and happiness. So when something's
course.
intrinsically going wrong, they tend to feel quite immobilised by it. But actually being the parent that can set those boundaries and re-establish a bit of authority and say, do you know what, darling, I've got this. And even if a child is feeling like, Mum, I don't want to make you worry. This isn't fair on you. Being able to say, actually, that's okay because it's my job as a parent. It's my job to worry about you, and I've got this.
Brilliant. Any final comments about how parents should look after themselves so that they...
Absolutely. I think it's really important to acknowledge if you're feeling demoralised, if you're feeling traumatised, if you're feeling depressed yourself, really access the support that you need. Make sure that you're not becoming an enabler to the problem, and that means you're looking really constructively and sometimes with a critical eye on am I as a parent doing anything which is enabling this. And that's why having that ability to stand back and say, actually darling, we're going to make change happen and we're going to do this together is so important.
Thank you very much for that, and thank you for joining us.